Everyone. Thanks for joining this session for today morning. This is the fifth session of the industry webinar series that's being organized by ACM India. And we are really happy to see you all on this call today. Today's session is going to focus on how to use AI responsibly in practice. What are the best practices we need to follow? What are the desired characteristics of a responsible AI? And how do we go about implementing these tips as we build out our AI in the enterprise or in our regular day-to-day activities? To speak about this, we have, it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Srinivas Padmanabhani. Dr. Srinivas is the co-founder and CTO of AI Ensured, which is a responsible AI startup focused in this area of building AI solutions in a more responsible manner. Prior to founding AI Ensured, Dr. Srinivas was the principal research scientist at Infosys Research, where he spent several years there. His specialization, based on his PhD that he earned in the year 2000 from the University of Alberta, is in the area of artificial intelligence. So he has been in this area for the last 25 years. So it's really our pleasure and privilege to have him on this call today. Dr. Srinivas has been honored with the title of Eminent Engineer from the Institute of Engineers, and is also the past president of ACM India. So he has a long-standing association with ACM India. So it's really a pleasure, Srinivas, to have you on this call today. And without any delay, let me hand over the floor to you to take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Venki. Thanks, the ACM India team, for this opportunity. It's good to come back home. Really, long memories with ACM India. I was the second ACM India president. Really seen it grow. Very good progress, I think. So what I'm going to talk about today is something which we talk about as the future of AI. It's something which we need to really look at from a perspective of giving an angle to making responsible AI work. Just give me a minute. Sorry about it.
Venkat, just make sure everybody can hear us. Can you all hear us?
Yeah. So to talk about this particular area, I want to mention that the way forward for AI is actually in a way which is responsible. So we all know that today AI is huge. It's supposed to contribute huge amount to global GDP, including some estimates like 15.7 trillion across different regions in areas like medical, healthcare, financial services, automotive, and even things like retail, consumer products. And not only that, there is another angle which is very important, is the social good. Even for social good, like championed by governments and United Nations, AI for social good is a real need of the hour. But the way the community has to come together is not in any vendor-specific manner or any tech-dominant manner, but just looking at the way we are thinking about future of technology affecting human life. I think it is the onus of the community to develop AI in what is called as a responsible manner. What is meant by that? So let's look at the words and the characteristics. The words are developing, assessing, and deploying AI systems. So it means a life cycle. Could be right from data acquisition, right through to monitoring deployed AI systems, all the life cycle. Then what are the expected characteristics? Make sure that AI systems are developed, assessed, tested, and deployed in a safe, trustworthy, and ethical way. So these are very strong adjectives, but what I will do is I will convert that into the technical aspect of what it means, right? That's the whole idea. Because from a practical perspective, there's always multiple ways of doing things. Some people say it's a process issue. Some people say it's a people issue. Some people say it's a technology issue. So what I would like to look at it, there is two combinations, mainly process and the technology. Two dimensions I'm very gung-ho about, because those are very primary to ensuring these characteristics of safety, trustworthiness, and ethical behavior of the deployed systems. So why? The reason is, despite high industry growth, responsible AI is a far cry. AI is still far from reaching expected behavior. You see multiple incidents. This is just one of them. In fact, I would say there is a chronicle of this whole incidents of AI behaving not responsibly happening. It's called incident database.ai. But these are some very common ones. Like, for example, LLM systems have been found to misdiagnose or under prioritize African American patients' concerns. Not acceptable. It's discriminatory. ChatGPT invented multiple legal cases that did not exist. A lawyer was trying to put forward them as a justification for certain kind of arguments. Not accepted. That's not something which is expected of a technology which is supposed to be rigorous and the future of technology where you're talking about legal things submitted by LLM. Uber's driverless car killing pedestrian. Not only this, it's actually Tesla driverless car, Uber driverless have been involved in multiple accidents. Amazon's the hiring tool found to be gender biased. Several AI systems fooled because of security, based tricks like Face ID being tricked with a mask. Or in case of some things, it's just the user inputs have turned, the AI systems like chatbots to be abusive. And these are not rational expected behavior. And that is exactly where, the need of the hour is that we need to have mechanisms for developing and assessing and deploying responsible AI as an underlying principle through the whole life cycle. So what does it mean? Just onion peel it. So in the earlier slide, I mentioned very long keywords, right? Safe, trustworthy, and ethical. So I'm just going to, convert that into what it means. It means you should be able to have transparency in your solutions. Means it's not like a black box. If the black box is decided, I'll not get my credit card, so I'll just be happy. It's not like that, right? Or the black box has said that this is where the cancer is. It's not like that. You should have transparency in the way it works. It may be complex technology, but you should have transparency. Addressing corner cases. You should not let scenarios like the Uber driverless car hitting a pedestrian, or you should not have Apple Face ID being misled. These are corner cases. So you should have comprehensive validation, rigorous testing, right? That's what it means. Testing for bias. You cannot have discriminatory behavior like the behavior of LLM systems for diagnosing patient concerns or hiring tools doing gender biased. Address complex situations. Even though your scenario of training may be quite well done in the lab, and put into production, you should be able to simulate all the complex scenarios it will subject to. So you should be able to have either comprehensive testing scenario like in the lab or be able to take dynamically input and update your models. Overcome data related challenges. A lot of times domains don't have sufficient data. So can you address issues of data adequacy by augmenting data, which is actually today very common. In fact, with generative AI, it's become even more interesting. Address data privacy. This is again a big concern because people are now concerned that a lot of AI systems are taking data from anywhere, without necessarily concerns for the PII being leaked into the model. So that's something we should test whether that is being happening. Adversarial attacks, which is basically the poisoning attacks we talked about, or clicking attacks that are happening on AI systems, can be addressed. Address compliance issues. This is a new kid on the block. From responsible AI perspective, it's not just about the enterprise following some principles. There's an external pressure now. For the first time in the history, let me tell you, in the history of IT, in the last 40 years, we are seeing massive regulation. 110 countries are coming up with regulations on AI. Reason? Exactly this. It's a massive technology which is going to change the whole of mankind and business. So naturally, governments are concerned. It's not about one technology versus the other. It's about human values at stake here. So compliances are emerging as another need for ensuring that whatever you're developing, deploying, and using AI for is done in concordance with human values. And for that, from a testing perspective, one aspect is holistic coverage. Can you cover all the complex scenarios? Can you cover all the realistic scenarios, bridging gap between what you do in the lab versus what is in the production, right? So tear it down. No big words, but what is technically components of responsible AI? Something from process perspective, something from technology perspective. From my years of experience, I've been at least 7 years into responsible AI, being one of the primary, can say, first mover in this space by having launched the world's first AI testing certification for testers, right? I got a lot of insights over the last 7 years, working even with governments and experts committees. even working with startups, working with big companies, working with non-profit organizations. I have all the experience. But then what I feel is, technically, it is brought down to 4 key technologies: explainable, interpretable AI, security and adversarial attacks, ML, privacy, bias, fairness, and ethics as technology elements. And then we look at process perspective. It's about inculcating a testing-oriented thinking, which is able to continuously test things for validation with respect to responsible AI principles and remediation thereof, so that you can continuously improve the adherence to responsibility. And then process-wise compliance with respect to emerging world laws. So last 2 are about process, previous 2 are about technology. Of course, there are people dimensions, which is about, are people trained on this? Are people made aware of this? Are people like testers? Are they made aware of how to do testing? Or are the developers, are they aware of how to create responsible AI aware training process? Or people who are data analysts, when they're doing data, pre-processing, are they aware of the elements of these 4 technology elements which are put into the process part? So all the 3 elements, people, process, and technology, come together in these 6 buckets to ensure responsible AI. Again, there are some things which, let me tell you, are not necessarily about technology. Something would be purely from governance and process perspective. Like, for example, accountability. How do you account for a failure? Who is accountable? Who is responsible? That's not a technology issue or a process issue. It's a more a broader discussion which requires thinking from experts in the field and the domain who are the users of the application. They can come together and come up with some kind of a governance mechanism, right? So let's look at each of them in separate. Explainable AI. When you talk about explainable AI, there are broadly the concept of 3 things: explainability, transparency, and interpretability. But the broader guideline is transparency. Transparency means how transparent are you to users in terms of whatever process you do, right? From data ingestion to what cleaning to modeling to deployment, all through, can you provide some kind of a visibility into the process so that you can get some idea of the behavior? And then we have 2 things: explainability and interpretability. They are 2 extreme thoughts. So the idea of this comes from the global ecosystem of technologies, like here, OECD, which is one of the large organizations developing standards. So they say AI actors should commit to transparency and responsible disclosure regarding AI systems. So what should happen? They should provide meaningful information, which can provide general understanding of how these AI systems are working. The general stakeholders, including developers and consumers of the AI systems, are made aware of the interactions with the AI system so that those who are affected by the AI system can understand the outcome. For example, a simple thing could be, let's say you're a youngster who's starting your career, but you are rejected a credit card system because an AI system felt that you should be denied a credit card. But is that just you take it lying down? No. It should be understand that you should be adversely affected. If you are, you should be able to challenge the outcome based on easy to understand information. And that logic, which serves as a basis for prediction or recommendation or positive or negative decision, is really made available to you. And that is where interpretability and explainability are 2 extreme thoughts of how to achieve the whole thing. We'll talk about the difference between both. But if you look at this whole area, this is called explainability. In fact, this was interestingly kicked off by DARPA, Defense Organization for US, because they felt that AI is a mainstream technology. And in areas like defense, which is very critical for country, citizens, and soldiers, etc., we cannot just say that this is a black box technology. No. In fact, as we speak, I'm going to address a group of robotic surgeons in India coming week, where they are top experts in robotic surgery, but they are asking, I'll have some kind of a discussion with them on what they're seeing as a kind of need for convincing people who are going through the surgery. How do you convince them? So that is where explainable AI comes. Give a use case I give, right? Robotic surgery. So what explainable AI tells you is, with all this extra transparency and given a bit of visibility of the rationale of how, the the model of the working. It gives users confidence. It provides safeguards against bias, and it helps regulatory standards, because a lot of regulatory standards now are most saying that can you provide visibility to the rationale? Then it improves system design. Like I'll tell you, for example, suppose I found based on the explainability of the input features, saying that, okay, out of my 10 features, only 3 of them are contributing to 95% of the actual decision, remaining 7 are contributing 5%. Means basically I don't need to work with all the 10 variables. I can reduce the system design to more simpler with 3 variables, right? It helps understand verify systems outputs. And that is exactly what we're talking about from explainability perspective. If you have expected outcome, and then you see how you can understand how it can really, be matched with the rationale. So, for example, I give you the example of youngster not getting a grade. So maybe it is because of the age and not having sufficient work experience. That is probably cited as the important feature which is causing that age. So that gives a rationale, right? Then from users feeling empowered, because it provides them some kind of a control, whether I should allow this decision AI system or whether I not allow the system. That helps. And ultimately, it provides a social justification. That's the big idea, right? So in that, we see that there are two extremes of this. One way is saying that I don't use complex models. I will use only AI models which give me some understanding of the working of the model, which a user who is affected can easily understand the working of that and understand how it is working. For example, it gives the ability to look at a model. So it provides its own explanation. It can be understood by humans, and looking at the model itself, for example, decision trees. So how does a decision tree look? Look, for example, let's say you say, at the top level, you're talking about age is less than so and so, is greater than so and so. After age, you'll say income is so and so, income is greater than so and so, less than so and so. So based on that, let's say I'm deciding my credit worthiness. So I know from a rule which path is following. Let's say I got denied credit card because age is greater than certain amount, but let's say income is less than so. So I know the combination of the input parameters, which is the rule which is governing the decision. So decision trees are one of the most transparent and interpretable techniques. But what is the flip side? Flip side is they're not necessarily the best fit in terms of accuracy or AI working with high precision. Because what happens is there are more complex technologies which are much more able to understand patterns in the data, especially which is nonlinear by neural networks, etc. But they're too complicated to be understood by humans. So what explainable models do is they go beyond the basic working of the model and give additional techniques to help understand how the model is working. Okay. So what is the range of explainability techniques? Simple explainable algorithms like linear regression or decision trees, or it can also be things like external tools to explain the model. So when you say external tools, there are two kinds of tools that are coming up. One is what is called as model agnostic. The model agnostic tools work on the idea of at a global level, not necessarily for a specific instance, how does the model work? It gives an idea of that. So we have techniques like SHAP Global, counterfactual. Then you have model specific techniques for specific instance. How is it working? Like LIME or activation maps, which is basically looking at your model and looks at the working of the CNN architecture and takes a step backwards. Then you have black box, which is basically like mutation testing. So here again, you can have black box or white box, right? Though both are local techniques, we can talk them as, either knowing the structure of the model and working with the structure like CNN, going backwards with the deconvolution, you can come up with class activation maps. Or LIME, where you do a mutation testing. Take the basic input, break it into several parts and see which part is getting more sensitive in terms of the output. So that's where you get what part of the input is most critical. Then you can have global techniques, which are what we call as, things which are able to work with at the entire model level. Can we have something which is going to give relative importance of which features are contributing? So let's look at, for example, intermediate model. I told you about decision tree. You can see the rules, and it looks easy to explain the working of the output in terms of the rules. That is basically like, for example, if it's overcast, it will rain. That's what is the explanation coming up, right? But in the example of a black box tool, mutation based, which is not necessarily interpretable. You see the right side? You see, for a given explanation, the green area is showing what part is the model looking at
to tell me that if the thing was predicted cat and actually it is dog, you see which part of the image is actually responsible for this kind of a thing. So it's clear here, for example. See here, so this is what is giving it rise to input saying that this is being looked at as a dog. So LIME is one such technique. So what the idea is, it does a mutation based testing where it trains an interpretable model and then weighs the proximity of sampled instances, where you take the different parts of the data and perturb it, mutate it, and see the corresponding sensitivity. You find which part is the most sensitive. That's what you get the output here. So let's look at explainability in practice. So what I told you was, okay, this is expectation, but is it really being used in practice? Yes. So I gave example of financial institutions, right? It is important that in order to have meaningful conversations with customers about decisions that are affecting their life. So instead of saying no to, let's say, why they are being denied a credit card, banks can now explain why and how is the process of what is the reason why their lending request has been refused. So that way what happens is, in case of many banking scenarios today, it has become common. And in fact, there have been several instances where several banks have been fined earlier because of lack of fairness. And that is something which now can be handled with better transparency using explainable AI. So let me tell you, explainable AI is the top technology research area and practice area in the area of responsible AI, because it is concerning the basic human values, where instead of black box AI tools, I'm saying, just taking some way of giving an idea of how the tools are working. Then comes the second most important area, which is the bias and ethics. So what is actually, if you look at bias, it's about prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or a group when compared with other, considered to be unfair. That's basically what bias is. So look at, in terms of AI systems, it's about typical statistical measure between system outputs and fair outputs. So if there is high unfairness, it means there is too much bias towards certain classes of the people. So attributes you should typically be from a social values perspective, which you should make sure that they are not linked bias, could be around gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, income level, age. These are again just few of the around 150 odd industry parameters which industry people are working on in creating biased tools, right? So what could be the source of bias? Again, people think it's only from the data, but it is important to understand that it is through the process bias can be introduced. It can be from sourcing data, agreed, like what is the input data, if the male versus female, more male data is there. Is that the reason for Amazon failure? Yes, probably. Then demographics of the data, place of the data, creation methods, etc. Then from sampling of the data, in the randomized sampling or sample size, is that causing bias? Or sometimes engineering process itself, because of certain kind of algorithm working, it may be biased towards certain parts of the data. Or when you're doing data cleaning or labeling of the data, there also it can be used. Or when you're doing actual training testing split, is there some kind of a bias introduced at that point? And one more thing to understand is, this is okay, but also you need to understand that bias may be crept in after the model has been deployed also. That is basically called as bias introduction during drift, where after you're deployed, it's possible that biases have crept into the new training data, which is not aware in the current version of the process. So then it means go back to the drawing table and redo the new bias aware remodeling. So OECD standards worldwide are coming up, where they're saying that across the globe, we need to have AI should be driving inclusive growth, sustainable development, and well-being. So that means they should respect human rights, democratic values, and therefore they should have appropriate safeguards to ensure fair society. So there should be transparency around AI to understand people are being affected in terms of biased behavior. They should be getting a visibility into that, and then they should have some way of this particular aspect of fairness is assessed, and you should redo the system so that it can be debiased. So example, in the Indian context today, what we're seeing is, we are seeing research community and practitioners coming up with Indian specific work on introducing ways of detecting and removing bias. So there is a concept called Indian bias evaluation data set. So what they're doing is, they are primarily looking at India specific biases in respect of caste, religion, and LLMs. Interesting thing is, they found that popular LLMs, they have a strong tendency for stereotypical outputs. For example, these models favor stereotypical, statements about caste 63 to 79%, religious bias. So these are some things which are notably higher than those observed for race and gender in typical Western context. So what the researchers in this community are working along with practitioners is they are reviewing current literature, they're consulting experts in linguistics and religious studies and incorporating feedback to refine and validate the data set. And this is very important from a perspective of India. You see, this is again important to understand. We are talking about popular LLMs. All of us are working with GPT 3.5, GPT 4.0, all that. But now we need to come up with some ways of evaluating and customizing so that we are giving an Indian context to making the systems work. Then we're talking about a concept which is very AI-specific security issue. Security issue is there in every IT trend, whether it's web applications, whether it's databases, whether it is networks. But now with AI, we got a new threat vector. And that is what we're talking about, additional hardening, additional so-called security measures that are needed for AI. So these are called adversarial attacks. Adversarial attacks are basically those which take inputs of the data, test data, or deployment time use data. They slightly perturb the valid inputs and make the model predict wrongly. Example, a red usually traffic symbol octagon, right? You put a small patch on that and it is possible that the driverless car will be fooled into thinking it's not a stop sign. Imagine the problem. It will cause accidents. That's the kind of thing. I showed you about earlier example of Amazon face mask being tricked. Like that, what is happening is several examples of spam filters being modified slightly so that they are being classified as not spam. Image classifier slightly changes human pixels are persuading neural network to change its image classification to a different object. So what exponential examples are doing is they're causing one ML system to fail, which will often cause a similar ML system. So this is not just restricted to one ML. Once you have decided on creating a similar attack by hacker, right, they will continue to propagate for similar other ML systems. So it's dangerous. So example, here is an example where on the left side, you see there is a speaker or some kind of a wood grasshopper, and then there is some kind of a dog. But you have applied a small patch in the middle column. And you see that on the right side, all the right-hand side are categorized by any CNN as ostrich. Crazy, but that's what it is. And that shows the soft belly of all the deployed AI vision systems. So imagine how easy is it to fool and attack AI systems. So what kind of attacks are talking about? We can see poisoning, where you do bad data is fed into the training, like in Microsoft chatbot. Evasion, where you craft input that causes machine learning system to misclassify. This is similar to impersonation, where a specific person is being fooled by the corresponding face recognition system to misidentify somebody. This may be to get unauthorized access. So both evasion and impersonation are actually adversarial attacks. Poisoning is more like I'm redoing the training data with poisonous examples to change the model. The last one is more about privacy attacks. This is about getting more and more information about the training data and the API so that the inversion attacks cause a privacy loss from having deployed the AI model. So let's look at case study of testing to harden and achieve adversarial low.
Srini, sorry to interrupt. Just one quick announcement. Those who are in the audience, if you have any questions, please do type the questions in the Q&A box and we will take it up at the end. Sorry, Srini, please continue.
Sure. So is it all theoretical? No. See here, for example, this is a very important, this is a medical diagnosis scenario where you're talking about radiologists using AI to detect breast cancer. Then what we found out was a simple adversarial attacks shows that they really caused modifications which misclassified 69% of the adversarial samples. It is very similar to the example which I showed you here, right? You can't just see by human eye any difference between left column and right column, but the system of AI has been. So a healthy system was flagged as cancerous. So it is important in medical settings, especially which involves human life or accident scenarios. It's very important that you need to have proper mitigation process for putting right through from the data all the way to, deployment, you should have a hardening process of, retraining the model with data set augmented with adversarial. That's what we call as adversarial ethical hacking. It could be also called as adversarial retraining. So that's exactly what is handled in the industry to increase the overall robustness of the model. And believe me, this is something we are just waiting on the tip of the iceberg. As AI becomes more and more mainstream, we need to increase hardening as an important part of the life cycle, as a very important part of that. Then we look at privacy. This is again one very big topic. As you know, as AI evolves, it also magnifies the ability to use personal information in ways that can intrude on privacy information. Because especially in world of LLM and personal data, we are not having control over what has gone into training of this process. We need more complex regulations, right? From India DPDP Act or GDPR. We need to understand that data privacy at the first level should be mandated. Then what is not yet talked about is, because of the availability of this kind of attacks, right? I talked to you about this inversion attacks, which are privacy attacks. You need to understand that we need to have mechanisms for moving the concerns from compliance beyond data privacy to model privacy also. It's not yet there in the domain of compliance, but it is important. From the community, I know that we need to work towards, whenever you get a model, see if there is a possibility for inference attacks. In fact, I don't know whether it's good or not, but there are known examples of inference attacks having been carried out on specific models and the entire training data inferred from that. So this can be a very big problem from competitive advantage perspective, right? So ML privacy is a very important thing. So if you look at, for example, the recent passing of Indian context of Personal Data Protection Act, it has clearly laid out what is expected in handling PII or personally identifiable information. Consent-based processing. The data can be only used with clear informed consent for legitimate use. Then what is the data principal right? The guys who own the data. They should be able to access, they should be able to correct, they should be able to withdraw the consent, they should be able to file complaints. Then there should be some kind of a fiduciary or organization which is responsible for the enactment of these laws. They should process the data lawfully. They should prevent unauthorized sharing or leaks, inform users of what purpose is the data used. Then they should also be, you should understand that in the current scenario, we are not prohibiting passing of data to other countries. Then from penalties perspective, they are working on really large penalties for data breaches. So this is just about very recent. Last year, it was released in one form, and a lot of improvements are also happening. But now in the Indian industry, this is going to become a norm. Whenever you're talking about AI systems or data analytics systems, you need to be aware of Indian Personal Data Protection Act, right? So all that what we said is, the dimensions of 4 of them: transparency, explainability, then ethics and bias. Then we talked about security and then privacy. These are the 4 actionable items which I say is where we need to look at from technology perspective. But from a process perspective, what is required? We need to have some kind of a approach to ensuring that any AI deployment is following responsible AI by providing right kind of testing. What would such kind of a testing involve? Transparency should be ensured. Security should be ensured by adversarial attacks retraining for security. Privacy by testing for PII leakage, and then maybe making changes by using differential privacy, etc. From coverage perspective, you should understand different complex scenarios or real world. Difference between production and real world lab should be simulated. Then we should look at bias and fairness testing and appropriate debiasing techniques. And then performance. You should see the performance of the system in training and in production and post-production. That's something I want to mention. This is something which is very, very important, which is not actually captured a lot of times, is the concept of concept drift. The concept of concept drift is that even though while deployment, you have got good accuracy, very good accuracy, 90%. But suddenly, over the period of time, let's say a month or 2 months in the sense, you see that people are not happy with the decisions powered by the AI. Because the underlying data which is being applied on has moved on and got to a new pattern. Maybe there's some bias that is kept in. or maybe the underlying pattern has changed, maybe the underlying taste. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm talking about a fashioning model with vision-based AI, which is trying to automate generation of fashion models, etc., fashioning designs, etc. But let's say, suppose there's some trend that has happened in the coming month with a new movie that's released, and there's some new design that has come up which is very popular. That's not kind of given in the older model, which is trained on older fashion data, right? So now you see people are unhappy because it's designing something which was with the older designs. So that is where you need to understand that testing for performance is not going to stop from data acquisition to data cleaning to model development to model deployment, but post deployment also during maintenance. That's what I call as model maintenance. So that you may have to go back and detect a drift and then go back and redo the model right from start, from data acquisition. It could be newer data and then retraining, or a combination, older data plus some part of new data. So that's where you need to understand that there is a need to revise. So the idea is you need to have, whenever you have a untested model, use the testing model and create a transparent, unbiased, secure, and well-tested AI. One other factor which is very important is data adequacy. This is something which we need to understand, that a lot of times you may not have sufficient data for the domain, because the transfer learning, which the model which you created, may be generic data, but not specific domain data for your application. So you need to augment the data with more specific data domain and fine tune it, right? So this is what I expect as part of a typical responsible AI enabling product or set of actions you need to take. So coming to compliance, this is something which I want to talk to you about. This is an emerging area. Over the last 3 years, we've seen a lot of activities in the world of AI compliance from different countries. For the first time in the history of IT, I would say so many companies. There are 150 plus regulations across the globe. Imagine, from United Nations, ISO, IEEE, ISTQB, and then now country specific, etc. But it's not like all of them are in place. But what is in place is the one which is most comprehensive, and it's called European Union AI Act. European AI Act is the first of the kind global regulation which is there in place, where they have said there are 4 levels of compliance I want to look at. Prohibited systems like social scoring, high risk systems which are like biometric ID, credit scoring, etc. And limited risk, which is requires some transparency, minimal risk with no worry. But the ones which are really to be banned are prohibited ones. But in the high risk, we need to provide comprehensive bias-free training data, clear user information disclosure, provide comprehensive testing, so that you have tested all that. And then you should have some kind of a conformance assessment. CE is the French version of what's called as conformity assessment. So the idea is, in this, it's not just a process checklist. You need tools which can help in doing the testing for high-risk systems and give you a report on where is the compliance level and where they're failing, and so that you can improve the process. And it is something which was deployed last year. And as we go through, by 2026, all the high systems, including high risk, will probably come into this space. As of now, we're working in the area where prohibited systems are getting scrutinized, and they're slowly working towards prohibiting them from actual usage. Slowly, we're getting into high risk, and by 2026 mid, we'll see that my gamut of all AI systems in European Union will be governed. In terms of continuing this, other countries have also come up with regulations. Like India is basing on consent-based data use based on DPDP, and they have also created, institutes like AI Safety Institute, which are going to talk about what should be the India-specific regulation. USA has something called NIST AI risk frameworks, but they are now looking at more from a safety perspective in the new government. Then UK has come up with pro-innovation, sector-specific, no central AI law. Japan has come up with AI, human-centric fairness and safety guidelines. Singapore has actually got a model AI governance framework and tools which allow you to look at any models and see how they're conforming. South Korea has, again, ethics first and AI Act, which is possible. And Malaysia is talking about ethical use in the development process. And similarly, UAE has also come up with something called as AI Ministry, which is coming with AI ethics. So it's not like all of them are as strict and rigid like what we're talking about, EU AI Act. So in conclusion, responsible AI is a desirable state. It's a long way to go before complete realization, but it's all there. It's not like it's only going to be when all the laws are complete. Because even without laws, I think there's no merit in doing something which is against human values. Lots of new laws are coming up, but let me tell you, instead of saying that I'll wait for the laws, it's a good idea to adopt these principles, like explainable AI in healthcare or in financial services. It's good to adopt it without somebody telling me to adopt it, right? It's a good idea. It gives you a good metric. It's like you are a good citizen. As a company, you are respected for your responsible AI. It'll help prevent accidents in AI because you can do comprehensive testing and find out where the gaps are between production level AI and then from a research perspective, a lot of you are probably researchers or students. You can look at new areas like AI security, privacy aware data mining. Then you also need to understand that when people talk about verification and validation testing, right? People typically talk about ISO standards like functional testing for performance. But now with AI, you're talking about testing for some things like bias and ethics, testing for conformance to ethical principles. Those added gets new quality attributes. So idea is good idea to include responsible AI in all your AI projects, and the journey has just begun. So let's make AI responsible by design and practice. So I hope this was useful, and I'll take lots of questions. So this is a huge area and not necessarily only restricted to what I say is the topics which are talked about. Each of them is a huge research area and emerging topic for lots of tools, lots of research, and lots of practices.
Hey, thanks, Srini, for walking us through an area that many of us probably are hearing for the first time, or maybe we have heard about it, but not really seen it in a very comprehensive way, the way you presented. So thank you for that. Uh, uh, Audience, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box. The chat box is disabled, so please type your questions in the Q&A box. While you're waiting for question from the audience, I have a couple of questions for you, Srini. So
Sure, go ahead.
you talked about transparency, fairness. While these are all desirable, how do you ensure that malicious intent or people with malicious intent don't misuse it? For example, you talked about the loan processing, bringing in transparency, saying, okay, these are the reasons why you did not get the loan, right? Is there a way that people would be able to misuse it and game the system so that their loan application is processed? People did that in when we moved towards automated resume screening, right? People started creating resumes that are bypassed or are selected by the ATS systems. So similar to that, do you see anticipate such issues and how do you address them?
Yes. Thanks for bringing that question up. So, I'll give you an example. This is not about this particular thing. I'll give you an example. Let's say we have a scenario where, radar was used to detect speeding. But then what happened is people started developing radar detectors. So it's a cycle. So people will be aware of the guidelines, people will be manipulating the guidelines, but then there'll be tools coming up. Just like today there are tools which are coming up with saying that are you using AI generated content in your research paper. So like that, there are more tools coming up with that. So it's an evolution. So each one is a one step further. But I think
everybody pushes the boundary and
exactly.
you need to stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly.
Okay. All right,
Both
great.
sides, the perpetrators as well as the good guys.
Sure. Okay, great. Shri, there are a few questions on the chat box, the
Sure.
Q&A box. I'll just quickly read the first one. The first one is, could you tell the impact of explainable AI in the medical domain?
Yeah. So I give you example, right? Solid example of the breast cancer scenario. So it's possible that there are scenarios where there is real implications of false positives or false negatives. False positives, okay, some extra effort, but false negatives are very problematic because if you missed. So what happens is even in false positives, you need to be able to explain why you took a decision, whether this particular part of the lesion which you're showing is actually a lesion or not. Or in case of false negative, you're missed because you've shown something which does not look like lesion, but a doctor can look at it and use the decision to improve it. So what happens is the doctors get further reinforced, whether radiologist or the doctor, they get further reinforcement using the explainable AI. So going forward across the globe, I think any AI-based diagnosis kit, any AI-enabled robotic surgery should be powered along with a screen which shows responsible AI alongside the AI. So that should be mandatory, actually, I would say.
Yeah.
Hope that answers your question.
I think so. I think there's a follow-up question which probably is very similar. So the question is, can we trust AI to make consequential decisions? So I think from what you talked about, maybe it's a segue to this part, right? How do you make sure that, how do you trust AI to make the decisions for us?
So it's simple. Sometimes you put boundaries. Like for example, in some cases, especially in automated straight-through processing in financial sector, what they're saying is below certain quantum, I don't mind. The impact is not high. But beyond that, they'll say, I'll bring a human in the loop. So there's no one answer for this. So if you think there is less harm or stakes are not high, then you may want to give it to automation. You may not want to get too much. Otherwise, you can always bring a human in the loop as a process for secondary. In fact, I've seen several customers where we have worked with, where they have said that they'll have a shadow period of 6 months, where they'll have the AI system and the existing human expert-driven system work parallelly, and then see that they're comfortable with both sides, giving similar results. And then they go and give it to the AI system to take on. So,
Right. I think the next question is also you probably answered half of it. Maybe I'll just read the question and see if you covered it. How can organizations effectively balance between transparency and model performance while implementing responsible AI, especially in domains like healthcare? Again, similar domain.
yeah. So I will give a very interesting or practical example what we are doing. Model performance is based on things like accuracy, things like how it's performing on less false positives or less false negatives. What I do is I use explainability to help me improve the quality and accuracy. So for example, I will look at all the false positives and look at the corresponding explainability and see that maybe there is a whole gamut of similar, you know, meaningless examples in the training data which is causing low quality. So I'll remove them. Then I look at ones which are giving positive, true positive or true negative. Then look at what kind of data is actually by looking at instance level explanation and find out similar images. So maybe I'll increase the quality of that. So I think explainability can be a very good tool to improve data quality. We have actually seen that in production for certain customers, using explainability as a way to improve your data quality. So I think that's where you can look at. So only thing why my request is this whole mad rush in the whole world of automation, end-to-end automation. Get out of that, because explainability is something human. It's not something that can be automated. You cannot, for God's sake, automate explainability. So that's something the industry also has to realize, that in this whole gamut of doing automation, RPA, and test automation, they don't realize that the best value comes from testing with human oracle. And in AI, if you are replacing human oracle is the best way to decide whether you should do it or not.
Right. This is based on a question, I mean, something that you mentioned. So I think question related to this. Is it good or bad to use AI material in research papers? AI helps and reduces efforts of a researcher in doing survey and so on. So I think
Flag it, accept it. Today, there has been an instance of ChatGPT accepted as a research contributor. But whether it's right or wrong, I think it's inevitable.
so
Today,
just like a
research.
citation, you expect that we should kind of make a disclaimer saying, yeah,
Yes,
part of
yes.
it has been.
Yes, it is expected. Actually, if you see the principles of ethics in many of the ACM and IEEE, I think that's coming up already.
So you
So
just disclose it upfront that, okay, it is part of it, or which part were AI generated, and then you're pretty, at least you have explicitly stated that you're using it.
and even from the community, right, ACM community or any of the community, scientific community, they have to move on. You are in a generation which is AI first. So even for your information, look at some of the tenders floated by government. Wordings are coming from Gen AI.
Yeah.
Contracts, they are being written, legal documents are getting written by Gen AI. So
Right.
why research should be different?
This is another interesting question coming up, a more recent one. How should we respond to AI being used in art forms like, the Ghibli art, the recent one that we're seeing, where there are mixed opinions about, is it a violation of somebody's consent of usage of data, fair usage of data, things like that. So how do we respond to it, or
It
what
is
are
a
your thoughts on
legal
that?
phenomena, but today, let me tell you, the concept of copyright is not something which is same anymore. What was earlier a copyright is no longer valid that much. Practically everybody is now using it. Practically everybody is aware that some form or the other, the big Gen AI engines are already using all the internet available data. So it's an irreversible phenomenon. Instead of fighting it, I would say take it as a habit and let's evolve a mechanism like the one I mentioned, right? In authors, give AI authorship. So same thing here. Be clear that you are going to live in the world of some original creators, some AI generated creation. So I don't think lawsuits and all which are going ahead with these privacy things, they'll go anywhere because, in some decade back, about a decade back, cloud computing, same thing. When people were talking about, you should have a provenance of which IP address has this computer being serving so that I can serve a notice. But in cloud, what happens? It's a dynamic virtual machine which is dynamic IP address. So which one will you serve? Where will you serve? So same thing, the legal obligations will change and social obligations also will slowly change. So our expectations of working with creativity will become like, instead of saying that I am an artist, I'll be a Figma enabled designer. It's not going to be a complete designer, but Figma enabled designer.
So in some sense, you're saying accept it because this is going to be the way of life. So
Yes,
fighting it is not.
So only thing what I'm saying is, but be aware. Don't just trust anything that comes.
Sure. One part I would like you to address. You talked about post-production drift and retraining and so on. There's a cost element associated with it, right? So training is a huge cost. So if you keep retraining, how do you address especially when we are talking about green sustainability or things like that? How do you address that in this context of mainly the drift part, and in general, when you look at all these training and retraining and so on?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of R&D going on cost-effective training, like using distillation, using compression, like quantization, etc. So one example, I'll tell you, if those of you are not aware, you should look at the architecture of DeepSeek versus, let's say, the GPT. So the kind of optimizations DeepSeek has done, for example, by using quantization models, by using even lower level process than A100 or H100. So they have used a lot of optimizations in the algorithms, which are probably yielding less energy. So there's been a lot of work and research in working with thrifty resources. That is one area of research. I don't think it's very solid. Second area which I want to mention is put the onus on developer organization or whoever is responsible for your AI system or the group. They should own, just like, in case of software, we talk about maintenance, right? AMC, not just developer, but there's a maintenance contract that goes on. So like that, there will be contracts around model maintenance. It's not about that you have done the AI modeling, you put it. It doesn't work like that. If model performance degrades, it is the onus on the user to come up and engage the consultant or the same organization to perform maintenance. So it's not different from software in that sense,
Yeah.
So I don't think it'll go away because today just about we're seeing the starting of enterprise level large scale AI adoption. But as we go forward, let me tell you, I'll tell a future role in 5 years time. We will have future roles which are like model maintainer, model what we call as retrainer, model tester. These are going to be real. Model drift detector. These will be real roles.
And you need metrics for that, right? Just like we have today, test coverage, test
coverage. So that's why in the testing community, we work on concepts like neuron coverage or sign coverage. There are numerous research happening on that.
So Srini, for the student community, there are a lot of attendees are students. So there are questions around, how do we get started? If you're interested in working in a project or an internship in this area of responsible AI, how do you go about it? How do we start working in this area? Can you throw some light on that?
So, for example, there are a lot of, groups in IITs and startups working in the responsible area, like my own company, Test A&D. We have a lot of interns who work at any point of time. At any point of time, a lot of people who are working with us as interns. Then there is the responsible AI group in IIT Madras with Professor Balram Ravindra. Then there is Mayank Vatsa from IIT Jodhpur. They are working a lot on. Then similarly, there are groups like Abhignan from IIT Kharagpur. There's a lot of work in IIIT Delhi. There's a group on responsible AI. There's a lot of work happening in IITs. Then there's a lot of startups working in this area. So I think it's just a question of you going and trying to find and trying to talk to them and trying to come up with some ways of connecting with this. So it's a question of how much effort you put in.
Yeah, that's on the internship, but even for them, for the students to say get started, are there some models or something that they can start
So
getting their
one
hands
thing I would
dirty
say
with?
is start with explainable AI. There is a very nice book by something called Christoph, Explainable AI in Practice. See that it has a lot of work examples and a lot of examples. So explainable AI is one area where you can really work with. And there are a lot of test data sets and explainability techniques. So that's one thing you can start. Explainable AI is one you can really do a lot of good work on. We're still a very open area. There are a lot of techniques are still to be discovered. So I think one area where I would suggest a lot of projects which you can do is in explainable AI. You can search for techniques around Lime, SHAP. You can get a lot of interesting, Kaggle examples or even GitHub
And are
examples.
these tools freely available for
Yes.
students to use?
Lime and SHAP are freely available. Or you can look at GradCam++. These are open. GradCam++ is actually an interesting tool which has come from IIT Hyderabad, out of one of the largest explainable AI tool you can think of coming from IIT Hyderabad. You should look at Professor Vineet Balasubramanian's site and look at that, GradCam++. Beautiful tools. All of them are open source, let me tell you.
One other general question was on the metrics, right? So you probably talked a little bit about it. How do you measure, the goodness of, you talked about, okay, it should be ethical, it should be explainable, transparent. Are there any metrics which says, okay, this model is more transparent than model B? Do you have any such
So
metrics that are
transparency
evolving?
is difficult, but ethics, yes, we have. For example, you can actually do something called as odds parity ratio. There are some very standard
Okay.
metrics for ethics and bias.
Even explainability and all these you have.
Explainability is a bit difficult because it's very
Difficult.
human subject.
Okay. All
But
right.
ethics, yes, we have something like
Ethics there are.
parity.
Okay.
Yes, they're
So
like
that
parity
also
ratio.
eventually you believe that it will evolve, right? Because
It will
you need
evolve.
to be
It
able
will
to
evolve.
compare models saying, so and so's model is better than my model
Right.
or your model is
So
better
let's say
than.
parity ratio. So because the beauty of bias is, see, another thing which I want to mention is the most quantifiable element in ethics is bias. But ethics may be much more beyond just bias. For example, is it a good use case even to adopt AI? For example, if you are developing AI for, let's say, for lack of better example, for developing micro weapons, which are meant for creating micro targeted self-propelling bullets powered with AI, which can go and pierce the heart of your enemy. That's a scary scenario, isn't it? So that itself is against the basic human ethics. So ethics is not so quantifiable, but bias is.
And do you see also the enforcement and policing kind of things also,
It will happen as we speak.
because we need more cybersecurity experts and things like that to the kind of examples you're giving, right?
Correct.
They also need to be trained, right? So
Correct.
are there sufficient, we need to have sufficient mechanisms to train them as well, right?
It is emerging because, as I said, as AI is just about post deployment with LLMs, it's happened. But as we grow, we are seeing exponential adoption of AI. So I think responsible AI will also grow like that. But let me give you one aspect which is very important for people to understand is that don't trust the output of AI as is. Trust but verify. For example, a simple thing like coming an output from any of the Gen AI engines, see if it has the provenance. Provenance means a source from where you got that. If you don't have, it could be a hallucination. So please be doubting of every output that is coming from Gen AI. That's one output I want from this.
I think the student community will hear you and put this up on their wallpaper or whatever, whenever they use AI tools.
No, it's like, it is about the example I wanted to show when we started, right? See this example. ChatGPT invented multiple legal cases as support, which did not exist. It's only because the judge was conscious, he went and looked up and said, these are all fictitious, and scolded the prosecutor. It's the same thing. I've had scenarios where I got a lot of my colleagues invented as doctor, even though they never got a PhD. Go to ChatGPT, ask about them, they'll create something. So it is very important to verify from multiple sources. The simplest thing you can do is go to Grok, go to ChatGPT, go to Perplexity, go to Gemini, and see if they're all giving the same result. At least that much you can do.
Sure. Great. And we are at the top of the hour and close to the 11 o'clock. So thank you very much, Srini, again for walking us through this, very interesting topic, very relevant topic, and guiding us on how to keep it very simple so that we all can start adopting this in practice. So thank you for that. I hope the audience, all of you, enjoyed listening to Srini. We will be sharing the PDF version of these slides with all of you. And the recording itself will be available on ACM India's YouTube channel. So until the next session, thank you again, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thanks for the opportunity, and good to come back to ACM for the talk.